The world is packed with tourist spots waving brochures and begging for selfies, and then there are places that respond to visitors the way a cat responds to a vacuum cleaner. These are locations where Google Maps politely shows the route, but your survival instincts close the app. Welcome signs were clearly skipped in the planning phase, probably on purpose. No fences are needed, because the stories alone do crowd control better than security guards. Curiosity shows up, reads the history, and immediately backs away. Somewhere on the planet, two such places exist, quietly perfecting the ancient art of being left completely alone. Nazino Island, Siberia. Nazino Island, often nicknamed Cannibal Island, sits quietly in the Ob River in Siberia, pretending it didn't host one of the most horrifying social experiments of the 20th century. In 1933, Soviet authorities decided it would be an excellent idea to deport thousands of so-called undesirables to an uninhabited island with no shelter, no tools, and no food, because apparently optimism was considered a survival skill. The plan assumed people would simply figure it out, as if human resilience could substitute for basic supplies. They did figure it out, just not in the inspirational way anyone would frame in a report. With freezing temperatures, starvation, disease, and administrative chaos working as a perfectly synchronized disaster team, the situation unraveled within days. Guards were confused, supplies were non-existent, and leadership responded with the timeless strategy of doing nothing and hoping it fixed itself. Violence followed hunger, hunger followed bad planning, and fear spread faster than any official order. By the time reality settled in, Nazino had transformed from a relocation site into a brutal lesson on what happens when bureaucracy mistakes people for cargo, and survival becomes the only moral system left standing. How starvation turned civilization into a suggestion. Once the food ran out, and it ran out immediately, Nazino stopped being a resettlement project and became a grim demonstration of what prolonged starvation does to human behavior. Flour was dumped on the island with no ovens, no tools, and no instructions, leading people to mix it with river water and consume it raw, causing severe illness. Guards were overwhelmed, authority dissolved, and desperation rewrote every rule people had ever learned about society. Cannibalism did not appear because people were cruel, but because hunger is persuasive, and ethics become negotiable when the body is shutting down. Survivors later described a place where morality didn't vanish, it simply lost the argument. Why Nazino disappeared from history? After the disaster, Soviet officials did what bureaucracies do best when things go catastrophically wrong. They buried the paperwork and pretended it never happened. Reports were classified, witnesses were ignored, and Nazino quietly slipped out of public memory for decades. The island returned to being just another cold patch of land surrounded by colder water. While survivors scattered with trauma, they were discouraged from discussing. It wasn't until archival documents resurfaced years later that the full scope of the tragedy became known. Nazino didn't vanish because it wasn't important. It vanished because it was too embarrassing to explain. North Sentinel Island. On the opposite side of the planet sits North Sentinel Island, part of India's Andaman Archipelago, and home to the Sentinelese, one of the last uncontacted tribes on Earth. Unlike Nazino, nothing went wrong here. In fact, everything went perfectly according to plan, because the Sentinelese never signed up for any plan at all. For thousands of years, they have lived in near total isolation, calmly minding their business while the rest of the world invented bureaucracy, emails, and unsolicited advice. They defend their island with arrows, spears, and a refreshingly clear stance on boundaries. Outsiders approaching the shore are not met with curiosity, pamphlets, or small talk, but with immediate, unmistakable hostility that requires no translation. This isn't chaos, it's policy. While modern societies debate privacy settings and data protection, the Sentinelese solved the problem with sharp objects and zero press releases. Their message has remained consistent for centuries. Visit denied. Explanation unnecessary. Why the Sentinelese reject the modern world so efficiently? The Sentinelese resistance to contact isn't random aggression, it's historical memory sharpened into instinct. Every known attempt at outside interaction, colonial expeditions, anthropological missions, or accidental visits has ended badly for someone, and almost never for the Sentinelese themselves. They have watched strangers arrive with gifts, curiosity, or confidence, and learned that all three can be dangerous. Diseases that barely register as inconveniences elsewhere can be catastrophic to isolated populations. And the Sentinelese appear to grasp this reality more clearly than many modern institutions. Their hostility is not ignorance, it's long-term risk management with no tolerance for optimism. While the rest of the world debates privacy settings, data breaches, and consent policies online, the Sentinelese enforce boundaries physically and immediately. There are no focus groups, no negotiations, and no second chances. In a strange way, their approach is brutally efficient. No contact, no contagion, no consequences. It may look extreme, but history suggests it works. Cannibalism, myth, and why context actually matters. Both Nazino and North Sentinel Island are frequently lumped together under sensational labels involving cannibalism, but the similarity ends there. At Nazino, cannibalism emerged as a symptom of engineered starvation and systemic collapse. On North Sentinel Island, reports of cannibalism are largely speculative, exaggerated, or secondhand, often fueled by outsiders projecting fear onto the unknown. The difference matters. One was a man-made disaster that stripped people of choice. The other is a society that actively chooses isolation and survival on its own terms. Treating them as the same story isn't just inaccurate, it's lazy. Modern laws that say do not touch, very seriously. Today, both places are legally protected, though for very different reasons. Nazino Island remains uninhabited and largely ignored, preserved more by disinterest than law. North Sentinel Island, however, is strictly off-limits under Indian law, with enforced exclusion zones designed to protect both the Sentinelese and anyone tempted by curiosity. The irony is that the most ethical action modern civilization can take toward the Sentinelese is to do absolutely nothing. No documentaries, no contact missions, no curiosity tourism, just distance. Why these islands make us uncomfortable? Nazino makes us uncomfortable because it proves how quickly civilization can collapse under bad leadership and worse planning, usually with impressive confidence and terrible math. North Sentinel Island unsettles us for the opposite reason. It calmly demonstrates that progress is optional and participation is not mandatory. One shows how systems fail people spectacularly, the other shows people rejecting systems before they get the chance to fail them. Together, they poke holes in the comforting belief that history always moves forward in a straight, sensible line. They also ruin the fantasy that modernity is a universal upgrade, rather than a subscription some might want to cancel. Nazino feels like a warning label that was ignored, while North Sentinel feels like a locked door with very clear instructions not to knock. One is chaos created by authority, the other order maintained by refusal. And deep down, both force us to admit something unsettling. Discomfort often comes not from horror itself, but from realizing how easily we could repeat it, or how confidently we assume everyone wants what we're selling. Not every place wants a footnote. Nazino Island and North Sentinel Island remind us that not every story exists for our curiosity to snack on like popcorn. One stands as a warning etched into frozen ground about what happens when humans are reduced to numbers, schedules, and bad ideas with paperwork. The other is a living society that looked at the modern world, read the terms and conditions, and firmly clicked decline. Both places quietly ask the same uncomfortable question. Just because we can go somewhere, does that mean we should? History suggests that enthusiasm is not the same thing as wisdom. Sometimes exploration doesn't bring enlightenment. It brings regret, headlines, and apologies written far too late. In rare moments of maturity, the most advanced choice humanity can make is to stay away, lower the camera, and mind its own business. Some places warn us to slow down, think harder, and respect boundaries that curiosity wants to ignore. If stories like this make you question progress, power, and human behavior, you're in the right place. For more thought-provoking history and uncomfortable truths, like and subscribe if you want to be smarter every day.